The sun was a merciless golden eye in the vast, indifferent blue of the sky. It baked the asphalt of the university parking lot, sending shimmering waves of heat into the air that distorted the eager faces of new students and the proud, anxious ones of their parents. I stood in the shade of a massive oak tree, its leaves still and silent in the humid afternoon, and felt a bead of sweat trace a slow, cold path down my spine. It had nothing to do with the heat. Daniel was late. My phone, clutched in a hand that was beginning to feel clammy, showed a string of one-sided messages. Me 10 a.m. Hey. So excited for today. Meet at the main gate at 1? Me 12:45 p.m. just parked. Where are you? Me 1:15 p.m. Everything okay? His last message received just 10 minutes ago was a terse, running late. Meet you at the orientation plaza. A familiar, dull ache started behind my eyes. This was our pattern. The slow, insidious erosion of my time, my excitement, my plans. For 2 years, I had built my world around the gravitational pull of Daniel Evans. He was charming, popular, the kind of guy who entered a room and the energy shifted towards him. In high school, being Daniel Evans's girlfriend had felt like winning a golden ticket. But here, on the cusp of our new beginning together at Crestwood University, the gold was flaking away, revealing cheap, tarnished metal underneath. I finally made my way to the orientation plaza, a sprawling courtyard teeming with life. Booths lined the perimeter, banners fluttering in the faint, hot breeze. Clubs vied for attention, fraternities and sororities preened, and thousands of students navigated the chaotic, hopeful landscape. I felt invisible, a ghost at my own future's feast. And then I saw him. He was cutting through the crowd with that easy, confident swagger I used to find so captivating. His smile was a flash of white, but it wasn't directed at me. It was for the girl walking beside him. She was petite, with a cascade of honey-blonde hair and wide, innocent eyes that took in the campus with theatrical wonder. She was a junior, I knew instantly. The way she carried herself had a practiced, polished ease that we freshmen hadn't yet acquired. She was laughing at something Daniel said, her hand lightly touching his arm. A cold stone settled in my stomach. "Alara. There you are," Daniel said, his voice a blend of apology and impatience. "Sorry I'm late. This is Chloe. She's a junior, a business major." I ran into her at the coffee shop near my dorm and she offered to show me around a bit before the main event. Chloe offered me a sweet, condescending smile. "It's so nice to meet you, Alara. Daniel's told me so much about you." Her tone suggested he told her very little or nothing at all. "Hi," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "A guided tour. How thoughtful." Daniel either missed or ignored the ice in my tone. "Yeah, she was just telling me about the best professors to avoid for Econ 101. You're taking that too, right?" I just nodded, my eyes fixed on him. The main event was the annual Welcome Festival and fireworks show that evening. It was a university tradition and we talked about it for weeks. It was going to be our first official university date, a symbolic start to our new life. "So," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "About the fireworks tonight. Did you manage to get the tickets?" The university sold special passes for the prime viewing area on the hill overlooking the lake. They were notoriously hard to get, selling out within minutes online. Daniel, with his fast fingers and competitive streak, had insisted on being the one to secure them. His expression shifted, a flicker of something, guilt? Annoyance? Crossing his face before it was smoothed over by a practiced, placating smile. "About that, babe." He pulled his wallet from his back pocket. My heart gave a foolish, hopeful lurch. But he only extracted 2 small laminated passes on lanyards. He held them up. "See? Got 'em." But there was a huge glitch in the system. I was only able to snag 2 before the site crashed. It was a nightmare. The world seemed to slow down. The roar of the crowd faded to a distant hum. I looked from the 2 tickets in his hand to his face, then to Chloe's politely sympathetic one. "2. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Yeah," he said as if explaining something simple to a child. "Sucks, I know. But Chloe here really wanted to go and she's been so helpful today, showing me all the insider spots. I figured since you're not as into big crowds anyway, you wouldn't mind sitting this one out. We can do something else tomorrow." He said it with such casual, breathtaking cruelty. I figured you wouldn't mind. He had made a choice. A choice between his girlfriend of 2 years and a pretty junior he'd just met. And he hadn't chosen me. Chloe gave a little shrug. It's such a bummer the system messed up. But Daniel's right, the hill is super crowded. It's not for everyone. I looked at Daniel. I looked at the boy I had loved, the boy I'd defended to my friends when they said he was self-absorbed, the boy I'd planned a future with. I saw the absolute lack of remorse in his eyes. He expected me to be disappointed, maybe to pout a little, but ultimately to acquiesce. To be the understanding, low-maintenance girlfriend I had always trained myself to be for him. All the suppressed frustrations of the last 2 years. The forgotten anniversaries, the last-minute cancellations, the way my achievements were always met with a distracted, "That's nice, babe," while his were celebrated as monumental events, came rushing to the surface. They didn't feel like anger. They felt like clarity. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked him dead in the eye, my face a calm, still mask, and I said the words that felt like the most natural, inevitable thing in the world. Let's break up. For a second there was only silence. Daniel blinked. Then a slow, disbelieving laugh escaped his lips. It was a cruel, dismissive sound that had once made me feel small. Now it just solidified my resolve. Again? He scoffed, shaking his head as if I were a petulant toddler. Alara, come on. Don't be so dramatic. It's just a fireworks show. He used that tone, the one he reserved for when I was being emotional and unreasonable. The tone that had always, in the past, made me doubt myself and back down. But something had broken. Or perhaps something had finally clicked into place. This isn't about the fireworks, Daniel, I said, my voice still eerily calm. This is about you only ever buying a ticket for one. In every sense of the word. You have a great time with Chloe. I turned before he could form another condescending reply. I didn't look back. I walked away from him, from the two of them, and melted into the crowd. The noise came back in a roaring wave, but this time it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like possibility. My hands were trembling, but my heart was terrifyingly, exhilaratingly still. For the first time in a long time I was making a decision entirely for myself. And it felt like freedom. The first hour was the hardest. After I walked away from Daniel, a strange, hollow adrenaline propelled me through the crowd. I moved without seeing, my vision blurred at the edges. I found a deserted bench tucked away behind the library, shrouded by weeping willow trees, and there the full force of it hit me. It wasn't just sadness. It was a cataclysm of emotion. Humiliation, rage, grief, and a terrifying, vertiginous fear. For 2 years, my identity had been intertwined with his. Daniel and Alara. It was a package deal. Now I was just Alara. Who was that? The future we had painted together, sharing an apartment off campus next year, graduating together, a life, vanished, leaving a stark white canvas that was both liberating and utterly terrifying. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over my best friend Maya's name. She'd been team dump him for months. She would answer on the first ring, she would rage with me, she would call him every name in the book. And I needed that. But a stubborn newfound pride stopped me. I didn't want to be the pathetic, dumped girlfriend sobbing on the phone. Not yet. First I had to just be. I sat on that bench until my breathing evened out and the hot, angry tears dried on my cheeks. The hollow feeling began to be replaced by a steely resolve. Daniel thought I was being dramatic. He expected me to come crawling back by nightfall, apologizing for my outburst. The thought alone was enough to solidify my decision. I stood up, squared my shoulders, and walked back into the fray. This time I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like a spy in the enemy's camp, observing, learning. I went to the academic booths alone. I picked up course catalogs and club flyers. I forced myself to make small talk with a girl at the creative writing table about a short story competition. Her name was Sarah, and she was kind, her eyes holding no pity, only a genuine interest. It was a small interaction, but it felt monumental. I was building my own world, brick by tiny brick. Later, holed up in my single dorm room, a last-minute blessing I'd initially been disappointed about, now my sanctuary, I finally called Maya. I told her everything. The waiting, the junior girl, the 2 tickets, the let's break up, the dismissive again. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, and then Maya let out a low, impressed whistle. Holy shit, Alara. You actually did it. You magnificent, glorious bastard, you did it. I let out a wet laugh, the tension in my chest easing slightly. He laughed at me, Maya. He actually laughed. Of course he did, she said, her voice sharp. He's a narcissist. He never thought you had the guts. Well, you showed him. What are you going to do now? I don't know, I admitted, lying back on my bed and staring at the stark white ceiling. Hide in my room for the next 4 years? Absolutely not, she commanded. You are going to that fireworks show. I sat bolt upright. What? No, I'm not. He'll be there with her. It's the last place on earth I want to be. It's exactly where you need to be, she countered, her voice firm. Alara, if you hide, he wins. He gets to think he broke you. You need to be seen. You need to be seen living your best life, looking hot and not giving a single damn about him. He'll be in the VIP section. I won't be. I'll just be some sad, single girl in the general admission crowd. Then get a ticket, she said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Maya, they're sold out. You know that. There are always ways. Scalpers. Or... She trailed off, a mischievous lilt entering her voice. You could always find a handsome stranger who has an extra one. I groaned. This isn't a rom-com. It could be, she insisted. Look, just promise me you'll try. For me. Go to the general area. Be seen. Please. Don't let him think he's ruined this for you. After I hung up, her words echoed in my mind. Don't let him win. The idea of facing that crowd, of potentially seeing him and Chloe wrapped in a blanket on the hill, made me feel physically ill. But the idea of him thinking I was sitting in my room crying over him felt infinitely worse. I spent the next few hours unpacking, trying to lose myself in the mundane task of making my dorm feel like home. I put up the fairy lights my mom had bought me, arranged my books on the shelf, and hung a print of a Van Gogh painting. With every item I placed, I felt a little stronger, a little more rooted in my own life. As evening began to fall, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, I stood in front of my small mirror. I put on a little makeup, not for him but for me. I wore a simple but pretty sundress, one that Daniel had never seen. I looked like myself, but a newer, more uncertain version. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey, this is Leo. We have Art History 102 together? You lent me a pen this morning when I was frantically searching my bag. Just wanted to say thanks again. A bunch of us are meeting by the large oak near the library to head to the fireworks if you want to join. No pressure. I stared at the message. Leo. I vaguely remembered a tall, lanky guy with kind eyes and a panicked expression during the first class of the day. I'd automatically handed him a spare pen. It was a tiny act of kindness, one I'd forgotten instantly. But he hadn't. Felt like a sign. A small, tentative anchor thrown to me in a stormy sea. I took a deep breath. This wasn't about finding a handsome stranger with a ticket. This was about not being alone. This was about accepting a small, kind offer from a potential friend. I typed back, my fingers trembling only slightly. Hi Leo. Thanks for the invite. I'd love to join. See you soon. I looked at my reflection one last time. The girl in the mirror looked scared, but there was a determined glint in her eyes. She was going to the fireworks. The air had cooled, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of late summer and the excited buzz of thousands of students streaming toward the lake. The path was lit by strings of soft, golden lights woven through the trees, creating a magical, almost ethereal atmosphere. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anxiety and defiance. I spotted the group under the massive oak tree Leo had mentioned. There were about 6 of them, laughing and chatting easily. Leo saw me first, his face breaking into a warm, genuine smile that immediately put me at ease. Alara. You came. Hey, everyone, this is Alara from my art history class. I was met with a chorus of friendly haze and introductions. There was Sarah, the girl from the creative writing table, who gave me a small, surprised wave of recognition. There was Ben, a guy with a camera around his neck, Chloe, a different kinder-faced Chloe, and a couple whose names I immediately forgot. They were a random assortment, thrown together by the chaos of orientation, and they welcomed me without question. We were just about to head down to grab a spot, Leo said, falling into step beside me as the group began to move with the river of people. The general admission area is supposed to be pretty good if you get there early enough to see over the crowds. It's better than the hill if you ask me, Sarah chimed in from my other side. Less pretentious. I managed a weak smile. I'm sure it's fine. We found a decent spot on the grassy slope that led down to the lake. It was already crowded, with groups spread out on blankets and clusters of friends standing and talking. The prime viewing hill, cordoned off with a temporary fence, rose to our left. I couldn't help my eyes from drifting toward it, scanning the figures silhouetted against the twilight sky. My stomach clenched. What if I saw him? What if he saw me? Looking for someone? Leo asked, his voice gentle. I jerked my gaze back to him. No, not really. Just taking it all in. He nodded, not pushing. It's a lot, isn't it? First day. It really is, I said, the understatement of the year. We sat on the grass and the group's conversation flowed around me. They talked about their majors, their dorms, their high school experiences. I contributed little, content to listen, to let the normalcy of it all wash over me. It was a balm. For brief, precious moments, I forgot about Daniel, about the breakup, about the humiliating scene in the plaza. Leo was easy to talk to. He was studying environmental science, was from a small coastal town a few hours away, and had a quiet, observant humor that didn't rely on putting others down. He asked me about my writing, actually listening to my halting explanation of why I loved creating fictional worlds. It's like building something from nothing, I said, surprised by my own passion. You control the weather, the outcomes, the hearts of the characters. Sounds powerful, he mused, his eyes thoughtful. A lot of responsibility too. No one had ever described it that way. Daniel had always called it my cute little hobby. As the sky deepened to a velvety navy blue, the first of the fireworks shot into the air with a sharp whistle. A collective ooh rippled through the crowd as it burst into a brilliant shower of green and gold sparks, reflected perfectly in the still surface of the lake. It was beautiful. And for a single heart-wrenching second I felt a pang of regret. This was supposed to be our moment. But the feeling was quickly chased away by a surge of something else. This was my moment. I was here with new friends under a sky painted with fire, and I was surviving. It was during a particularly spectacular volley of red, white, and blue chrysanthemums that I saw him. My eyes, wandering the crowd, landed on the VIP hill. And there he was. Daniel. He was standing, not sitting, a blanket draped over his shoulders. And he was looking directly at me. Our eyes locked across the hundreds of feet of darkness and swirling colored light. The noise of the fireworks and the crowd seemed to fade into a dull roar. I could see the shock on his face, clear even from this distance. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't with Chloe in that moment. He was alone, his body rigid. He saw me sitting with a group, laughing at something Leo had just whispered in my ear. He saw me not crying, not hiding, but living. And the expression on his face wasn't one of amusement or dismissal. It was one of pure, unadulterated confusion. I didn't look away. I held his gaze, my face neutral. I let him look. Let him see that I was fine. That his again had been the final, definitive word. Then Leo, following my gaze for a split second and perhaps sensing my tension, leaned in slightly. You okay? He asked, his voice a quiet murmur near my ear. It was an innocent, friendly gesture. A simple check-in. But from Daniel's vantage point, it must have looked intimate. I saw Daniel's face change. The confusion twisted into something darker, something raw and ugly. It was a look I had never seen on him before. It was the look of a man whose carefully constructed world had just received a seismic shock. He took a step forward as if he meant to climb over the fence and march down the hill. But then another massive firework exploded directly overhead, a giant silver willow that illuminated the entire scene in a stark, brilliant light. In that flash, I saw Chloe stand up beside him, her face puzzled, and put a hand on his arm. He shook her off, his eyes still burning into me. I finally, slowly, turned my head away from him and looked up at the sky, where the silver sparks were drifting down like dying stars. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that started deep inside me. Leo followed my gaze upward. Pretty amazing, huh? Yeah, I said, my voice clear and steady. It really is. The show reached its crescendo, a furious, beautiful barrage of light and sound that filled the sky and shook the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. As the final echoes died away and the smell of gunpowder settled on the air, I risked one last glance toward the hill. Daniel was gone, swallowed by the dispersing crowd on the VIP slope. But the image of his face, that complete and utter breakdown of his composure, was burned into my mind. It wasn't the grand, dramatic confrontation I might have imagined. It was silent, witnessed only by me and the bursting fireworks. But it was everything. He had broken down. And I was still standing. As we all stood up, brushing grass from our clothes, Leo turned to me. "A bunch of us are going to get late-night pizza. You in?" I looked at his open, friendly face, at Sarah's encouraging smile, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer night. "I'm in," I said. And for the first time all day I truly, completely meant it. The days that followed the fireworks show were a blur of frantic activity and a deliberate, conscious rebuilding. I attended all my classes, I joined the creative writing club with Sarah, and I spent my free time exploring the campus and the surrounding town with my new, slowly expanding circle of friends. Leo was often there, a quiet, steady presence. We never talked about the moment at the fireworks, the intense look I'd given a figure on the hill, or his timely question that had seemed to shatter something in the distance. It hung between us, an unspoken understanding that I wasn't ready to voice. Daniel, on the other hand, was trying to make himself very heard. The text started the morning after the fireworks. They began placating, then quickly escalated. Daniel, 9:02 a.m. Hey. Can we talk? Daniel, 11:15 a.m. You were at the fireworks. With some guy. Daniel, 2:30 p.m. Alara, this is ridiculous. You're taking this too far. Daniel, 5:45 p.m. I get that you're upset about the tickets. It was a mistake. But parading around with some random dude to make me jealous? Really mature. I read them with a cold detachment I didn't know I possessed. He wasn't apologizing. He was accusing. He was framing my very existence as a personal attack on him. I didn't block him. There was a part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, that enjoyed watching him unravel from a distance. It was a dark, petty satisfaction, but it was mine. I saw him twice on campus. Once outside the student union, he was with a group of his lacrosse buddies. He'd made the junior varsity team, something he'd crowed about for weeks. He saw me walking with Sarah and Leo, and his laughter died in his throat. He stared, his jaw tight, until one of his friends nudged him and he forced his attention back to them. The second time was more direct. I was in the library, tucked into a corral in the literature section, researching for my first writing assignment. The scent of old paper and dust was a comfort. I felt a shadow fall over my book and looked up. It was Daniel. He looked tired, his usually perfectly styled hair was slightly messy, and there was a frantic energy in his eyes. "Elara," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk. Now." "This is a library," I said, my voice calm. "People are trying to study." "Don't give me that," he hissed, leaning in. "Who was that guy?" "That's none of your business, Daniel." "Like hell it isn't," he said a little too loudly. A student at a nearby table shushed him. He lowered his voice to a furious whisper. "We were together for 2 years. You don't just get to move on in a week with some art nerd." I closed my book with a soft thud. "We are broken up. You don't get to have an opinion on who I spend my time with." "This is about the tickets, isn't it?" he said, his tone shifting to one of strained reasonableness. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? Chloe was being pushy and I didn't want to be rude. It was a social faux pas. I admit it. But this silent treatment, this revenge act, it's beneath you, Alara." There was the master manipulator at work, reducing his betrayal to a social faux pas, framing my independence as a revenge act. He was trying to drag me back into his narrative, where he was the reasonable one and I was the emotional, irrational woman. "There is no act, Daniel," I said, gathering my things. "There is just me living my life. A life that no longer includes you. Please don't interrupt my studying again." I stood up and walked away, leaving him standing there amongst the stacks of books, his argument dying unspoken. I didn't look back. My heart was pounding, but it was with power, not pain. I had stood my ground. I had used my words calmly and clearly, and I had walked away. It was a victory far sweeter than any apology he could have offered. The encounter left me shaken but also fiercely empowered. That afternoon I met Leo in the campus coffee shop, The Grind, to study for our upcoming art history quiz. He was already there, 2 mugs steaming on the small table, his textbook open to a chapter on the Renaissance. "You okay?" he asked immediately, his keen eyes missing nothing. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. I took a sip of the tea he'd bought me, chai he'd remembered my order from once before. The warmth seeped into me. I took a breath. "I ran into my ex, Daniel." Leo's expression didn't change, but his eyes grew more focused. The ticket guy. I blinked. How did you know about the tickets? He had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. Sarah might have mentioned something. She said you had a nuclear-level breakup at orientation. I let out a short, surprised laugh. Nuclear level. I like that. I sighed, tracing the rim of my mug. He was not happy to see me moving on. He accused me of parading you around to make him jealous. Leo leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful frown on his face. And what did you say? I told him it was none of his business. A slow smile spread across Leo's face. It was a good smile, one that reached his eyes and made tiny crinkles at the corners. Good for you. He called you an art nerd, I added, a mischievous part of me wanting to see his reaction. To my surprise, he laughed, a warm, genuine sound. Well, he's not wrong. I am a nerd and I do love art. I'll take it. He leaned forward again, his expression turning serious. For what it's worth, you don't seem like the kind of person who needs to parade anyone around. You seem perfectly capable of standing on your own. His words landed softly, healing a wound I hadn't even known was still bleeding. Daniel had always made me feel like I needed him, like I was lucky to be in his orbit. Leo saw me as capable. We spent the next 2 hours quizzing each other on Giotto and Brunelleschi, the awkwardness of my earlier encounter fading away in the face of easy companionship and shared purpose. It was nice. It was normal. It was everything my relationship with Daniel had never been. As we packed up to leave, Leo slung his backpack over his shoulder. There's a small gallery downtown having an opening reception for a new local artist on Friday. Some of my friends from my painting class are going. Might be fun. Would you want to come? It wasn't a date. It was framed as a group thing. But the hesitation in his voice, the slight hope in his eyes, made it feel like something more. Something tentative and new. I looked at him, at his kind face and his steady presence, and I thought about Daniel's furious, possessive glare. I'd love to, I said. And for the first time, the thought of a future without Daniel didn't just feel like survival. It felt like a promise. The local gallery was nestled on a cobblestone street downtown, its large plate glass window glowing with soft, warm light. I felt a flutter of nerves as I approached, smoothing down the lines of my dark green wrap dress. I'd spent more time on my makeup than usual, and the unfamiliar click of my heels on the pavement echoed the nervous rhythm of my heart. This felt different from grabbing coffee or studying. This felt significant. I saw Leo waiting just inside the door, talking to a girl with vibrant pink hair and a nose ring. He looked different. He'd traded his usual jeans and t-shirt for dark chinos and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked older, more assured. When he saw me, his face lit up with that same warm, genuine smile, and my nerves settled instantly. Alara, you made it. This is Nina from my painting class. The girl with pink hair gave me a friendly once-over and a grin. Hey. Leo's told me you're the wordsmith who put Brandon in his place during the writing workshop last week, she said. I blinked. How did you hear about that? Nina knows everything, Leo said dryly. She's the campus gossip hub. It's a gift, Nina said, winking. Come on, let's get you a drink. The artist is this guy who does these massive, chaotic canvases that are actually about the silence in between the noise. It's pretentious as hell, but the free wine is good. I laughed, feeling myself relax into the group. There were a few others from Leo's circle. Ben the photographer and a couple of other art majors whose names I promptly forgot. They were a vibrant, eclectic bunch, talking passionately about composition and color theory and the hypocrisy of the modern art scene. They included me in their conversations without condescension, asking about my writing with a curiosity that felt respectful, not obligatory. Leo stayed by my side for most of the evening, quietly pointing out details in paintings he thought I might like, his commentary insightful and devoid of arty pretension. He didn't try to impress me, he simply shared what he loved. It's interesting, I mused, standing before a large dark blue canvas streaked with silver and a single bold slash of crimson. In writing, we're always told to show, don't tell. This feels like that. It's not telling me, it's about loneliness and a sudden shock of connection. It's showing me. Leo looked from the painting to me, his expression unreadable for a moment. Exactly, he said softly. You get it. The air between us felt charged, thick with unspoken things. It was in one of these quiet moments as we were looking at a smaller, more intricate sketch, that I felt the familiar cold prickle on the back of my neck. The sensation of being watched. I casually turned my head, scanning the crowd of well-dressed gallery-goers. And I saw him. Daniel. He was standing near the entrance holding a plastic cup of wine, his eyes fixed on Leo and me. He wasn't with Chloe. He was with a couple of his lacrosse buddies who were looking bored and out of place. He must have seen the poster for the exhibition downtown and come. Or maybe it was a horrific coincidence. His face was a mask of controlled fury. He watched the easy way Leo stood close to me, the way he leaned in to speak, the way I smiled up at him. He was witnessing a version of me he had never known. Confident, engaged, intellectually stimulated, and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with him. Our eyes met across the room. The noise of the gallery seemed to recede. His gaze was a physical weight, demanding, accusing. I felt a jolt of the old fear, the instinct to placate, to de-escalate. But then I remembered the library. I remembered my own strength. I didn't look away. I didn't stiffen. I simply held his gaze for a long, steady moment. Then I deliberately turned back to Leo, who was still studying the sketch. "This one is my favorite," I said, my voice clear and calm. "Yeah," Leo said, smiling down at me. "Why is that?" "Because it's not trying to be anything more than it is," I said. "It's honest." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel set his cup down on a nearby table with a sharp, decisive motion. He said something to his friends and then turned and walked out of the gallery, the door swinging shut behind him with a final, angry click. The spell was broken. The air felt light again. "You okay?" Leo asked, his voice gentle. "You seem a little distracted." I looked up at him, at his kind, perceptive face, and I made a decision. The past was trying to poison my present. It was time to lance the wound. "Can we get out of here?" I asked. "Maybe go for a walk?" "Of course," he said without hesitation. We said our goodbyes to Nina and the others, and soon we were walking along the quiet, lamplit streets. The night was cool and the sound of our footsteps was a companionable rhythm. I took a deep breath. "Daniel just left the gallery," I began, my voice quiet. Leo was silent, just listening. "I told you he was upset about me moving on," I continued. "But it's more than that. Our whole relationship, it was about him. What he wanted, his schedule, his ego. Orientation day. He only brought tickets for himself and another girl. He told me I wouldn't mind sitting it out. When I broke up with him, he laughed. He said again, like it was a joke." The words tumbled out, the humiliation and pain I'd suppressed finally finding a voice. "And seeing me with you, it's driving him insane because he can't stand the idea that I exist outside of him. That I might be happy without him." I stopped walking and looked at Leo, bracing for pity, for awkwardness. But he just looked at me, his eyes full of a deep, quiet understanding. "He laughed at you?" he said, his voice low and serious. "What an asshole." A surprised, watery laugh escaped me. "Yeah. He really is. He doesn't get to do that, Alara," Leo said, stopping and turning to face me. "He doesn't get to make you feel small anymore. You walked away. That took more guts than he'll ever have." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "And for the record, I'm not just some guy you're using to make him jealous. At least I hope I'm not." "You're not," I said, the truth of the words resonating deep in my soul. You're the first person who has made this place feel like it could be home." The streetlight above us cast a soft, golden halo around him. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before he gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric, sending a shiver through my entire body. "Then that's all that matters," he whispered. He didn't try to kiss me. He just stood there, his gaze soft, his presence a solid, comforting warmth in the cool night air. And in that moment I knew. Daniel's fury, his attempts to sabotage this, they were meaningless. He was a specter from a past life. The future was here on this quiet street, with a boy who saw the honesty in a sketch and the strength in my silence. The week after the gallery opening felt like breathing fresh, clean air after being trapped in a smoke-filled room. A weight I hadn't even fully acknowledged had been lifted. Telling Leo the truth about Daniel had been a risk, but it had paid off in a newfound ease between us. We fell into a comfortable rhythm. Study sessions at the grind, group lunches in the noisy cafeteria, quiet walks across campus under the turning leaves of early autumn. I threw myself into my classes, especially my creative writing workshop. My professor, a stern but brilliant woman named Dr. Evans, no relation thankfully, had pulled me aside after class. "Your piece on the unraveling, Ilara," she'd said, peering at me over her half-moon glasses. "It's raw. It's got teeth. I'd like you to consider submitting it to the university's literary journal." The piece was a fictionalized account of my breakup, a swirling, emotional interior monologue of that moment. The praise sent a jolt of pure, undiluted joy through me. This was mine. An achievement born entirely from my own pain and my own craft. I texted Maya and my mom, and then without a second thought I texted Leo. "Me. Dr. Evans wants me to submit my story to the Lit Journal." Leo, 3 heart eye emojis. "I'm not surprised. It's incredible. Told you so. Celebrate with ice cream after class?" This was happiness. It was simple, it was built on small, genuine moments, and it had nothing to do with anyone's approval but my own. Daniel, however, was not content to remain a specter. His text had stopped, but his presence morphed into something more insidious. I'd see him in the distance watching me. He'd be in the same large lecture hall for a gen ed class, always sitting a few rows behind me, his gaze a cold spot between my shoulder blades. He never approached me again, but his silent observation was a constant low-grade threat. One Tuesday I was leaving my dorm to meet Leo when I found a single wilted red rose tucked into the door handle. There was no note, but its meaning was unmistakable. It wasn't romantic, it was funereal. A gesture of ownership, not affection. I threw it in the trash with a shudder of disgust. The climax of his silent campaign came on Friday. I had a late class, and by the time I packed up my things, the autumn sun was already dipping below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the quad. I decided to take a shortcut through the older part of campus, a labyrinth of pathways between the Gothic-style science buildings. It was poorly lit and usually deserted at this hour. I was about halfway through, my footsteps echoing in the quiet, when I heard another set of footsteps behind me matching my pace. A prickle of alarm ran up my spine. I sped up slightly. The footsteps sped up. "Ilara." I froze. It was Daniel's voice. I turned slowly. He was standing about 10 feet away, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets. He looked gaunt, shadows under his eyes. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, my voice steady despite the frantic beating of my heart. "I just want to talk," he said, taking a step forward. "You won't answer my texts. You run away every time you see me." "Because we have nothing to talk about," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "It's over. You need to accept that." "Is it?" he asked, his voice taking on a wheedling tone I knew all too well. "Is it really over? Or are you just trying to teach me a lesson? Because it's working, Ilara. I get it. I was an idiot. I took you for granted." He took another step. The space between us was shrinking. "This isn't a lesson, Daniel. It's a conclusion." "Don't say that," he said, his voice hardening. "We had 2 years. 2 years. You don't just throw that away over one stupid mistake." "It wasn't one mistake." The words burst out of me, fueled by months of pent-up frustration. "It was every time you were late. Every time you forgot something that was important to me. Every time you made me feel like an accessory to your life. The tickets were just the final, perfect example. You only ever brought a ticket for one, Daniel. You." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That's not true." "It is true. And you know what? Leaving you was the best thing I've ever done for myself." I turned to walk away, my entire body trembling. Is he better than me? The question was ripped from him, raw and ugly. "That Leo guy. Is that it? You traded up." I stopped but didn't turn around. "It has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with me." "Bullshit," he snarled, and I heard his footsteps quicken. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Look at me." I wrenched my arm away, spinning to face him. "Don't you ever touch me again." His face was contorted with a pain I now recognized as bruised ego, not a broken heart. "You were mine," he whispered, the words dripping with a terrifying possessiveness. "I was never yours," I said, my voice cold and final. "I was with you. And now I'm not. If you ever approach me again, I will report you to campus security." The threat hung in the chilly air between us. I saw the shock register in his eyes. The Ilara he knew would never threaten him. She would cry, she would forgive, she would fold. This new Alara was a stranger and he was afraid of her. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away, my head high, my steps firm and sure. He didn't follow me. He didn't say another word. I walked all the way to the campus green where I was supposed to meet Leo, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The confrontation had left me shaken, but also fiercely, triumphantly alive. I had faced him down. I had spoken my truth. And I had won. Leo was waiting on our usual bench, 2 hot chocolates steaming in the cool evening air. He took one look at my face and stood up, his expression immediately concerned. Alara? What's wrong? I walked straight into his open arms, burying my face in his shoulder. He held me tightly, his hand a steady, comforting pressure on my back. He confronted me, I mumbled into his jacket. In the pathway by the science buildings. Leo stiffened. Did he hurt you? No. Not really. He doesn't get it. He thinks I'm his. He's wrong, Leo said, his voice firm. He pulled back slightly, cupping my face in his hands. His eyes were dark with concern but also with a fierce protectiveness. You belong to no one but yourself. In the safety of his embrace, with the warmth of the hot chocolate seeping into my hands and the certainty in his voice, the last remnants of my fear melted away. The storm had come and I had weathered it. Daniel had thrown his best shot and I was still standing. More than standing, I was thriving. As I looked up into Leo's eyes, I knew the battle was over. The war was won. Now it was time to enjoy the peace. The confrontation with Daniel proved to be a final, decisive break. After that night, the silent observations stopped. The lingering presences vanished. It was as if, having finally been faced with an immovable object, his unstoppable force had simply dissipated. A part of me would always be wary, but the constant low-grade anxiety was gone. I was free. And in that freedom, something beautiful began to blossom. My life at Crestwood solidified, no longer defined by a reaction to my past, but built proactively for my future. My friendship with Sarah deepened. We became writing partners, critiquing each other's work with a gentle but honest rigor. Nina, the pink-haired gossip hub, revealed herself to be a fiercely loyal friend with a surprisingly tender heart. Our group was a chaotic, wonderful mix of artists, scientists, and writers, and I found my place within it effortlessly. But the center of this new world, its steady, warm sun, was Leo. What had started as a tentative friendship was deepening into something more profound. We never officially put a label on it, but the air between us was charged with a quiet, potent electricity. Our study sessions grew longer, often ending with us just talking for hours about everything and nothing. Our childhood dreams, our fears about the future, the books that had shaped us, the utter ridiculousness of campus politics. He was teaching me to see the world differently. On one of our walks, he wouldn't just point out a pretty tree. He'd explain the symbiosis between the oak and the moss growing on its north side, his passion for the natural world infectious. In return, I'd weave a story about the lonely giant the tree had once been, and he'd listen, utterly captivated. One rainy October afternoon we were in the grind, claimed our favorite worn armchairs in the corner. I was struggling with a particularly stubborn paragraph in a short story, and he was sketching in a large leather-bound notebook. I'd never seen his art before. "Can I see?" I asked, nodding towards the notebook. He hesitated, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "It's just doodles." "Let me be the judge of that," I said softly. He handed the book over. I opened it and my breath caught. They weren't doodles. They were exquisite, detailed pencil sketches. Studies of hands, of leaves, of the way light fell through the coffee shop window. And there, scattered throughout the pages, were sketches of me. Me bent over a book, my brow furrowed in concentration. Me laughing, my head thrown back. Me looking out the window at the rain, a pensive look on my face. He had been capturing moments, fragments of my new life, with a tenderness that made my throat tight. "Leo, these are..." I couldn't find the words. "Sorry," he mumbled, looking embarrassed. "I should have asked." "Don't you dare apologize," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I traced the lines of a sketch where I was smiling. "They're beautiful. You see me so clearly." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. The noise of the coffee shop faded away. "It's hard not to," he said quietly. "You're the most vivid person I've ever met." It was in that moment, surrounded by the scent of coffee and the sound of rain against the window, that I fell in love with him. It wasn't a dramatic fireworks and orchestra moment. It was a quiet, certain settling, like a book finally finding its place on the right shelf. Later that week we were walking back to my dorm after a movie with the group. The night was crisp, the sky a clear, black velvet dotted with sharp, cold stars. Our hands brushed against each other and then fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing. "I have something for you," he said, stopping under a street lamp just outside my residence hall. He pulled a small, flat package wrapped in brown paper from his backpack. I unwrapped it carefully. It was a framed piece of art. Not a sketch, but a beautiful, professional print. It was the sketch of me looking out the window at the rain, but he had transformed it. He had inked and painted it in soft watercolors, the blues and grays of the storm outside the window making the warm, golden light of the coffee shop, and my profile within it, seem like a sanctuary. At the bottom, in his elegant script, he had written, "The calm in the storm." Tears welled in my eyes. "Leo. It's how I see you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You walked through a storm to get here. And you created this incredible calm, this strength. You built a life, Ilara. And I'm so grateful to be a part of it." I looked from the beautiful heartfelt gift to his face, so full of earnest love and hope. There were no more words needed. I reached up, pulled his face down to mine and kissed him. It was nothing like the frantic, possessive kisses I'd known with Daniel. This was slow and sweet and deep. It was a conversation. A promise. It tasted of understanding and of a future waiting to be written together. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. "Stay with me tonight?" I whispered. Just to talk. Just to be." He smiled, that warm, crinkle-eyed smile that was now my favorite sight in the world. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Up in my room we talked until the early hours, curled up on my small dorm bed. We talked about our pasts, our hopes, our fears. I told him things I had never told anyone. He held me, his presence a solid, unshakable anchor. This was what it was supposed to feel like. This safety. This mutual reverence. This was love. Not a performance, not a competition, but a partnership. The Fall Festival was Crestwood University's biggest event, a sprawling, joyous celebration on the main quad before students buckled down for midterms. There were game booths, hayrides, a pumpkin carving contest, and live music from student bands. The air was thick with the scents of caramel apples, wood smoke, and crisp autumn. And as the grand finale, just like at orientation, there would be a massive fireworks display over the lake. This time I had a ticket. Not a scalped one, not a pity invite. Leo and I had logged on the minute they went on sale and secured them together. I felt a world away from the anxious, heartbroken girl of September. As I got ready, pulling on a soft, cream-colored sweater and a pair of jeans, applying my makeup with a steady hand, I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who knew her own worth. My happiness was no longer a variable dependent on someone else's actions. It was a fact. I met Leo and our group at the entrance to the quad. He was wearing a dark green flannel that brought out the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. When he saw me, his face lit up with that same heart-stopping smile, but now there was a new layer of intimacy, of ownership in the best possible way. He laced his fingers through mine and brought our joined hands to his lips, kissing my knuckles. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I said, and I was. We spent the evening in a blissful, chaotic whirl. We laughed ourselves sick trying to win a giant stuffed bear at the ring toss. We shared a caramel apple, our fingers sticking together, and we slow danced under the fairy lights to a cover band's rendition of a cheesy love song, his arms a secure circle around me. It was perfect. It was everything a university experience was supposed to be. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of lavender and rose, we started making our way with the crowd toward the lake for the fireworks. We had a prime spot in the general admission area, the same slope where we'd sat that first night. Felt like coming full circle. We spread out a blanket and sat, Leo sitting behind me, his legs bracketing mine, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. I leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady, solid beat of his heart against my back. It was a pose of pure, unashamed affection. I felt safe. I felt loved. The first firework shot into the sky with a familiar whistle, bursting into a shower of brilliant silver. The crowd cheered. And that's when I saw him. Daniel. He was standing alone on the fringes of the general admission crowd, not far from our blanket. He wasn't with Chloe. He wasn't with his lacrosse buddies. He was just there. A solitary, brooding figure in the swirling, happy mass of people. His eyes were locked on us. On the way Leo held me, on the way I relaxed into his embrace, on the easy, intimate way I tilted my head back to whisper something in Leo's ear, making him smile and tighten his hold. I watched the scene play out on his face, illuminated in strobes of colored light. I saw the initial shock, the same as at the first fireworks show. Then came the bitter anger, the jealousy I had expected. But as he watched us, as he took in the undeniable reality of what we had, the quiet comfort, the deep connection, the palpable love, something in him broke. The anger dissolved, replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension. This wasn't an act. This wasn't a rebound. This was real. I had not only moved on, I had upgraded to a life, a love, a version of myself that was infinitely better without him. His shoulders, usually held so proudly back, slumped. The arrogant set of his jaw went slack. The fireworks continued to explode overhead. Crimson flowers, golden willows, blue spirals, casting his face in a kaleidoscope of light and shadow, each flash revealing a new layer of devastation. He looked hollowed out, defeated. He finally truly understood that he had lost me. Not because of a petty argument over tickets, but because of the fundamental poverty of his own character. He had laughed at me. Again, he had scoffed. Now he was the punchline. He stared for one long final moment, as a particularly spectacular volley of fireworks, the grand finale, lit up the entire night sky in a furious, beautiful explosion of sound and color. In that blinding, incandescent light, I saw a single tear trace a path down his cheek. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the darkness and the cheering masses. I felt nothing for him. No schadenfreude, no pity. Just a distant, quiet acknowledgement that a chapter was finally, irrevocably closed. Leo nuzzled my neck. "You okay?" he murmured, his voice a soft vibration against my skin. He hadn't seen Daniel. His world, in that moment, consisted only of me and the fireworks. I turned in his arms, looping my hands around his neck. The sky behind him was still sparkling with the dying embers of the finale. I looked into the eyes of the boy who had seen my strength when I felt weakest, who had offered friendship when I felt most alone, and who had given me a love that felt like coming home. "I'm perfect," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. And as the last firework faded into smoke and the crowd's applause thundered around us, I kissed him. It was a kiss of gratitude, of promise, of a future written not in the shadow of the past, but in the brilliant, dazzling light of a new beginning. The story of Daniel and Alaire was over. The story of Alaire was just beginning. And it was going to be extraordinary. The end.